The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade.
That's
The Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Pick me up, I will be outside. Take it off, we've got nothing to hide. Shake it loose, open up your mind.
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 132, and our guest is Bronson Arroyo. Bronson is a singer and songwriter who has a new debut full-length record of originals with his band, the 04. The album is called Some Might Say, and it was released in February of 2023 on Nasty Hook Records. Prior to his career as a songwriter, Bronson played Major League Baseball for 16 years, y'all. If you're a fan of The Marinade or have followed me on social media, you know about my passion for baseball, and specifically the Cincinnati Reds. Bronson Arroyo won a World Series with the legendary 04 Boston Red Sox, was a MLB All-Star, earned a Gold Glove, and is a member of my beloved Reds Hall of Fame, with whom he spent the bulk of his career. We caught up with Bronson at the house that he and his band were renting for their gig at the Innings Festival in Tampa, Florida last month, and this was a far-reaching conversation that is one of the great thrills of my creative life. Everyone, it is my honor to bring you my conversation with Bronson Arroyo.
All I know, you better hold on tight. You better hold on tight. You make me feel alive. Let's take the car and drive until the stars align. Unafraid to leave it all behind tonight. 'Cause I feel so alive.
Be cool, man.
I'll sit still. Right?
Be cool,
I'll sit still.
Man, thanks for doing this. I just, off mic, we were just talking about how I grew up not too far from kind of where you grew up, you know, and I am wearing my Reds hat because I was born in Kentucky
Oh, that's cool.
and grew up an obsessive Reds fan. I watch almost every, I have the MLB package. I watch almost every game, and you are one of my favorite Reds. So like the crossover of this show, you know, like you making music and being a creative plus being one of my favorite Reds of all time. This is a huge honor.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. You know, just being in that organization for 9 years and you know, playing there long enough to now, you know, be getting ready to go into their Hall of Fame and you know, you're thinking about Johnny Bench and you're thinking about Pete Rose and Joe Morgan and all the guys from the Great Eight, you know, and you just don't think of yourself in that kind of a breath. So, I mean, just to have someone who, you know, says like, hey, man, you're one of my favorite Reds of all time, which is, you know, it's kind of cool because people have been watching since the 70s, you know.
Well, I think part of why, exactly, and there have been so many greats, and you played with some of the greats too, you know, the great Reds. I think part of why I was drawn to you was I didn't know you were a musician, I don't think, at the time, but that there was a creativity to the way that you played. There was like it was clear you were a cerebral player. Right. And that's one of the things that I love about the game in general is it's such a thoughtful game, right? And it rewards creativity.
Right.
And that was something that you were clearly excellent at.
Yeah, you know, that was, well, for one, you know, you hear it all the time where people will be like, I can't watch baseball, you know, it's too slow and too boring. But the people who really love the game, they understand the subtleties, they understand the chess match, they understand the beautifulness between the pitcher and the catcher and the batter that's going on and all these different things. And, you know, part of that was the fact that I grew up in the weight room with my father at a really young age. And, you know, I was pushing just crazy weight. I'm actually coming to find out now. I don't think there's another 8-year-old on the planet who's ever pushed the weight I pushed. I have this DVD. I have this DVD I was showing the guys last night. They're like, "You're always talking about this, Bronson. Like, show us the video." So I show them the video of me. I'm 8 years old. I weigh 60 pounds.
Yeah.
I bench 130. I squat 255 and deadlift 235. I'm an 8-year-old kid and I weigh 60 pounds. You can't find a kid. I can't find anywhere on record that anyone's even in the same universe with that in modern day.
Yeah.
100-pound kids can't even come close to those totals. And in that time, though, if you think about being an 8-year-old kid and pushing, 230 pounds, and then 6 months later you get 235 or 240, and how much work it takes to get to the extra 5 pounds, a lot of it was strategy. And my father was always talking about how tight are the clothes we're wearing, what colors are in the weight room. We were talking about rest. We're talking about carbo loading. We were talking about all these subtleties. And so he turned my brain on for strategy. And so, yeah, I could physically dominate kids when I was young. But when I got into pro ball and you realized a 90-mile-an-hour fastball wasn't going to dominate the scene, you had to find other ways. But my brain had already been turned on for that strategy, which you're talking about, the cerebral way of trying to be successful.
Dude, that's what a gift from your father too. To talk to you about things in that way. But also you received it, right? So like it's both. It's both having it there presented to you, but also you being open to it. You having that open mind. Do you think that you have always had, like, were you always a creative? Did you always have a sense that you were a creative person?
Yeah, I think so. I can remember a lot of times, you talk about being, you talk about asking people what they did as a kid. And a lot of times you hear people saying, I was bored here, I was bored there. I felt like I was never bored. It was always, you were always interested in something. I felt like curiosity was just there for me. And whether that was like taking a toy apart and seeing how the engine worked, or trying to hit a tennis ball against the wall and see if you could hit the line, 10 times in the next 2 minutes, or whatever it was, you were just always kind of challenging yourself in a lot of ways. And inside of that, just thinking about detail, I felt like it was being creative, whether it was playing a video game or climbing a tree. You're always trying to be efficient, find ways to kind of cut the corner in a way that was honest and had some integrity in it. Those things were already there, I think, even without what my father was doing. And I think he was just adding fertilizer to it as we were going along.
Yeah. So you're playing ball, you're lifting, you're working out, you're an athlete. Were you also that part of about not ever really getting bored? Were you writing at all? Were you making stuff as a kid growing up?
I wasn't writing a whole lot. I kind of was, I thought of schoolwork in a lot of ways as busy work. I got great grades, just because it felt like it was what you were supposed to do. But it didn't interest me that much. I really, I was listening to music at the time, but I wasn't really delving into it. It was more about, I don't know, just kind of the things that were around me that would turn you on. It was, I was kind of a regular kid in a lot of ways. Like I loved to just, ride a 3-wheeler or a go-kart and ride my bike around town and climb a tree and build a fort and chop down stuff. And, just with your friends, you're making these moments with your friends as well. But I was always kind of the guy who was driving the train a little bit. I was always organized. I was always the one who was kind of saying like, oh no, I think we should do it this way, guys. Like, or we don't want to do that, man. That's going to get us in trouble, man. I'm not looking for that. You're having a good time and you're doing these things, but I was always kind of a reasonable kid in a way. I liked riding a bike, but I wasn't the guy who was going to try to jump the 20-foot jump and break my neck. I was always a bit, cautious in a way. I felt like my body was of value. I knew it was going to take me somewhere, and I really didn't want to kind of put it in harm's way.
Okay. That's really interesting, especially thinking about making a record. So it sounds like you have in you this sort of like a discipline of a sort, which is useful in making a record, real fucking useful.
Yeah.
But also when you're making a record, especially of your own songs, right? That's a risk. You're really throwing yourself out there. So can you talk about that tension at all, and like how you came to a place to go, I'm ready to go for this?
To be able to do that. Yeah. Physically, like I said, I always tried to make myself, put myself in positions to not be harmed. I knew my elbows and my knees and stuff were of value, right? They were going to be used a lot in my life. And part of that was being what we were doing in the weight room. You're physically seeing it there. But, some of the stuff that I also got in those early years was a guy who was very, very confident. My father was very confident in his abilities. He didn't second guess himself a lot. And even when we failed, you know, people have often asked me, how did you not turn out to be one of those kids like a Todd Marinovich? You hear these stories of the stereotypical little league dad who's so harsh on the son that by the time he's 20 years old, he's burned out of the sport. He doesn't love it. He's been critiqued too hard. And the difference I always say was that my father just was an ultimate optimist. So yeah, he was pushing me hard, but if I went 1 for 4 in a game, he was talking about, man, what a great hit that was. He wasn't talking about the times that I struck out, right? He was never saying, oh, why, you know, you went 3 for 4 today, but I can't believe that lefty got you out in the 9th inning. It was like, hey, you know, we got beat today, but you know what? We're going to get him tomorrow. It's all right. We're going home. We're going to get our rest. We're going to get him tomorrow. And because of that, he changed the way that I thought about sport. You know, it didn't feel like anything was ever a failure. It just felt like part of kind of going along. And in that, I grew to not doubt myself, to not be insecure about exposing myself. And so when it comes to writing music, I find even the guys in the band, you know, a lot of guys I've been around, there's a certain type of a musician. And a lot of times they feel a little naked putting themselves out there, saying these stories, telling these words out to people. And I just didn't really have that. And I think coupled on top of that was over the years, I've seen a lot of stars come through the locker room. And I've seen people at the highest levels of different things, whether it's an actor or an actress or a musician or an athlete, and see the self-doubt in them. You know, them come to me, and you're seeing this guy on TV who's an absolute monster, but inside the locker room, I see the softness and the insecurity and the way that he beats himself up the days after not being successful and how it's bothering him. And that just never bothered me. I always had an easy way of brushing things off my shoulder, and that has parlayed itself now into be able to write a record and be like, I'm going to put it out to the world, and if I think it sounds good, you know, then I'm going to put it out. And in a lot of ways, I almost sometimes think about it where my wife will say to me something like, you know, I say, well, don't worry about it. Who cares what people think? And she'll say, but you care what people think, right? And I say, yeah. I said, this is how I think of it. When I look in the mirror and I look at what I'm wearing, if I stamp it good, I'm walking out of the house. I never think about it again. But if I think it looks bad, then yes, I care that other people are going to look at me and think that it looks bad. Yeah. So I'll change it. But if once I stamp it good, it's good. So for me, the music, once I'd listened to these songs and I thought those are good enough for other people to hear, I never kind of like second guess myself again. It's like, oh, we just move forward.
Wow. I love that. I want to adopt that in my own life. Like, what a great life lesson in general. That idea of like, God, I love that. If you, that mirror thing is such great imagery. Like if you're cool with how you look, then it's all good. Who gives a fuck?
It doesn't matter.
It
then.
doesn't
Right.
matter. Then.
Right.
Right.
I do care what people think about what my hair looks like, but
Sure.
only if I think it looks bad.
I think it looks bad.
Only if I think it looks bad. If I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, you look gross, and yeah, I don't want to present that to the world. But as long as I think it looks good, when I walk out, man, you never think about it again. Now I'm just enjoying my time or whatever you're doing.
Dude, what a great creative lesson too. What an enormous creative lesson. And because I think when we make stuff, right, those of us who make stuff, we so often are insecure about it. And there is a lot of, you know, you're in your head about this thing that I'm putting out in the world, right? Did I ask Bronson all the right questions in this, you know, in this conversation that I only get 45 minutes with him or whatever?
Right.
Did I do it? Did I get all of it in that I wanted to get in? But if I walk away from this and feel like, you know what, that was fun, that was great, then who cares what everybody else
Then
thinks?
it shouldn't really matter, you know, unless I guess unless you're putting it out, you know, if I think a record sounds good and then you put it out to the world and everyone's telling you like, yo, that's not good enough, man. Then you have to go back and kind of like, am I being realistic about myself, or is my overview of what I'm looking at, you know, am I actually seeing the world in reality here, or am I kind of like cockeyed in some way? But you know, in my life, for the most part, if I thought, hey, I got a good breaking ball here, I think it's good enough to get people out, it got them out eventually, right? So it's kind of like, if you have enough of those things check out in the way that you have operated, then you say, oh, I think I'm being reasonable here. I think I'm singing in key, right? People ask all the time, like, when did you think you could sing? I was like, I didn't sing until I was 22.
That's crazy.
I was in double A with an acoustic guitar, and somebody says, well, why'd you start singing? It's like, I just sang a couple of karaoke songs, and I thought people were giving me a decent response, and I thought I was singing in key. You know, it made sense to me. I knew I wasn't the greatest singer, but I knew that it wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
And as long as those things are kind of checking out, then you can continue to move forward without kind of second guessing yourself all the time.
At that time, you're in AA and you've got an acoustic guitar and you're singing karaoke. are you at that point writing songs?
Not really. You know, I've written up until 2018. I never really tried to write a song that I thought I'd want to hear on the radio. I would have been writing songs for kids at elementary schools, maybe for kids at a hospital. You know, specifically maybe about childhood memories of driving back to the Keys with my parents, you know, after we moved up north of Tampa when I was about 10.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you're talking about very specific things in your family or somebody had passed away, let's say, but not really writing from like, I just want to write a song that's on a record that I'd want to hear in my car at midnight driving down the road, right? I'd never really done that before, and that didn't start until after I retired.
That's really interesting. Is that a question of creative capital? Is that like being a Major League Baseball player is incredibly consuming. There's you're doing press and you're playing and you're rehabbing and all that kind of stuff. You're traveling. Is that a function of just sort of like not having the sort of time to do it, do you think?
I think part of it was probably not having enough time. Also, you know, it's taken me, I didn't pick up a guitar till I was 22. So I'm trying to work on the craft of even be able to play the guitar. Then you're working on the craft of my singing decent. And now it's like, there's all these layers, right? So it's like you're peeling back this onion. So if we talk about, for instance, you know, pitching, you can pitch, you know, in your backyard is one thing, then just throw a bullpen in front of the general manager and a bunch of other players. It's a whole nother level. Yeah. Now, spring training game, different level. Now, regular season, different level, right? World Series. So with music, it's the same thing. It's like you play around the campfire, but now I need to stand up and have my face near a microphone. I can't look at my fingers as much. And now I'm standing and I'm not sitting, right? And so how does the guitar... So there's all these layers to trying to get comfortable. So in those early years, it was just trying to perform. Once I thought, hey, let me try to write a song in the early years, it would have been because something came to me that said, you know, I need to write a song for these elementary school kids because they're not going to listen to me talk for 45 minutes and I need to capture their imagination a little bit in a different way. Yeah. It would have been like a tool. But to try to write on a real serious note, it was never something that I thought I didn't have a desire to do it, really. There was so many songs in the world that I wanted to try to duplicate. I wanted to sing a Pearl Jam song. I wanted to sing a Beatles song. I wanted to sing a Nirvana song, that I was kind of stuck in that mode. But as I was getting better and better, and you're playing more and more shows with a cover band around Cincinnati over the years or in Boston, you're starting to realize that, you know, there's a performance here and I'm getting more comfortable on the stage. And maybe there's a time that I do want to tell some stories that are my story because it might be a little more special. I'm not sure if it is or not, but I'm going to maybe test the waters one day. And I felt like at the end of my career, I was seasoned enough as a musician over 20 years to say, let me see if I can put down my own stories and see if we can make this make sense.
So interesting. I'm interested also in, I mean, baseball, of the games, right, of the major sports at least, I feel like is the most creative game and is the one that rewards creativity the most. But there's also, like, I know for me growing up as a ball player, I always felt like my creative side, because of the culture of sports, and less so in baseball, but the locker room culture wasn't very welcoming to someone who identified as a creative person. Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, I definitely did a little bit. You know, there's something about an acoustic guitar and being able to perform songs that, you know, I'd say 9 out of 10 guys you run into, their ears are still going to perk up if you're doing that decently. But if I was in the locker room, let's say, you know, taking a bunch of photos with a camera or painting or something, there's no doubt that I've seen other guys, you know, break out a camera on a plane and you know, 20, 30 years from now, those pictures are going to be absolutely gold. But if he's getting criticized at the moment, like, what are you doing taking pictures on the plane? You know what I mean? It's like, you're a softie, man. We're here, you know, we're men here. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
We are alpha, you know, we do this. And, you know, in a testosterone filled world, which it is, you know, that way in sport, because that's really the only way to survive in sport, period. Yeah. Even though baseball can be as creative as you want, you know, it's not probably as physical as football or basketball, but you still need a certain amount of power and explosiveness to make it happen. And so you're still living inside of a world also where a lot of guys are, you know, might tease you based on the fact that, you know, they're not comfortable doing something like that. And so, you know, when you think about a professional athlete, I mean, these guys are 23 to 30 years old in their prime. You know, they really are kids. When I first got to the major leagues, I thought it was going to be, when I watched TV in 1985 and I saw Dwight Gooden and Ozzie Smith and Tommy Herr and some of these legends of the game, I thought every guy in that locker room or in a big league field is a guy's guy, and they pay their bills on time, man. They got good relationships with their wives. And then you get inside the locker room and you find out that, sometimes Manny Ramirez is watching cartoons, man, and eating freaking Fruity Pebbles. And you're like, what is going on here, right? It's like, it's just, it was a totally different vibe, and you realize the insecurities were there even for some of the greatest players, and some of the goofiness and the silliness in this guy, and then the seriousness of someone else that you thought was different. You got a whole bag of tricks there, just like in any other job in life, and you realize that sometimes they didn't have these things all tied and buttoned up.
Man, you're not surprising anybody that Manny was watching cartoons and eating Fruity Pebbles, but your point is well taken. Who are the most creative guys, either on the field or just in general? Who are the most creative guys that you played ball with?
That I'd played with. A lot of them, guys like Ryan Dempster. He's going to be doing here at the festival. And he's doing the off the mound. Guys like Kevin Millar. A lot of times the guys that were kind of witty and funny, they always seem to be kind of creative. And then you always had some quiet guys. I played with a kid named Danny Herrera, a little lefty that threw a screwball for a couple of years with the Reds, and he's an amazing painter now.
Cool.
But a lot of these talents, didn't surface until afterwards, because the game was just so hard to survive in a lot of ways that you didn't have a lot of time to let that flower or bloom. And even if you did, you're probably doing it on a real low level at the house. Luckily for me, I'd gotten comfortable enough at the major league level that I could bring an acoustic guitar into the room and have it around. And the last 10 years of my career, I got to, play right outside the shower where the resonance was great with the tile while the guys were showering before the game started after batting practice, and they were enjoying these songs that I was playing because they either didn't know them or they did know them, and they were like, oh, that's cool, I haven't heard that in a while, or whatever. But a lot of times, you didn't really get to see guys, doing art or doing poetry or, writing books or anything inside of a locker room. A lot of times your time was too limited in a lot of ways.
Man, you touched on something there that I wanted to ask you about, which is, and I think you've kind of given us a window into the answer to this question, but people don't have careers as long as yours. And not only that, but to overcome the adversity that you did. Like, as I was looking back on your career preparing for this conversation, you went through a lot of shit, man. Injuries, trades, there's this one year where you, I forget exactly when it was, 2012 or something. You're coming off this really rough year, and you'd had carpal tunnel not long before that, and then you have this killer 2012, and you'd been in the league for a minute then. What do you think? What do you think helps you to overcome that adversity? How were you able to do that?
To do that, yeah. 2011 was a rough year. I came into spring training, and I was feeling really sick, and I didn't know why. It just felt like a flu, like a strong flu, but it wasn't going away after 14 days. Wind up having mono. At the same time, a thing called valley fever out in Arizona, which is like this airborne spore that you get from cactus, and it can turn into meningitis in your lungs and kill you. And that ended a couple of guys' careers, and then had whooping cough on top the same time. I was coughing every 5 seconds for 3 months. Jesus. Felt so bad. Barely went to the park in 11. That's the year I pitched 199 innings. And didn't get the 200 because I started really slow that year. But you always. Physically, I had less injuries than the average guy. That part of that was the fact that I didn't have to pitch max effort. And I also took care of myself from a younger age than most guys. I think I'd set a foundation of playing baseball year round, probably earlier than most guys. But, getting through the adverse times of it when I was with the Pirates, they were bouncing me up and down from AAA to the big leagues a lot. They wouldn't let me shake the catcher off. There's all these things back then.
You're really young then, too.
I'm 22, 23. Yeah. I'm in the major leagues, and you're just dealing with, back then there was nothing but a bunch of 35-year-old grown men in the locker room, and they were hazing you pretty heavy. Yeah. And it was definitely difficult to deal with. I think what got me through all the tough times was just kind of a belief in myself that I was good enough to play at that level for a long period of time. And I also knew, that underneath I had some stuff that nobody else knew what was going on. Nobody knew I was an 8-year-old kid squatting 255, right? When you have that in under the hood, and I look at a guy like Kurt Schilling, and maybe he's chewing me apart, and Kurt's a better pitcher than me and always will be. But I know when he was 8 and I was 8, I was doing some stuff, and this guy wasn't doing nothing, right? So that just that breeded confidence in me that, hey, if we just stay the course here, yeah, maybe I won't play in the big leagues for 15 years. Maybe it's just going to be 6.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know where the end of the line would be, but I really felt like I belonged at that level. I was also a consistent winner at every level at the minor leagues, and I was proving to people that you could be a nice guy, you could be a good guy, you can continue to have success, you could be a good teammate. There was a lot of things that I brought to the table inside of a locker room that weren't necessarily wins and losses that I could feel the love, and people around me could feel that as well, how I was parlaying that along the way. And I didn't think that was going to win me any baseball games, but I knew what I was bringing to the table was just pretty solid all the way around. Like, you're being a solid guy, you're being a solid pitcher, you don't get hurt very often, just going to continue to do this thing and see what happens.
Man, that part about just like being somebody that people want to be around, like that when they're making the decision about the cut, you know, like
Right.
I'd rather keep Bronson, who I like having around, than this other guy who's maybe throws a little bit harder, but isn't necessarily somebody that, you know, he's not going to give us enough that he's going to be worth bringing him into the clubhouse. That's a great lesson right there.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's no doubt that I've played with guys. I mean, I loved playing with all the guys on the Reds, and Matt Latos was part of that rotation in 2012, and we had a great year. But, you know, I mean, if I'm honestly looking at that situation, you know, Matt Latos in a lot of ways, based on personality and just work ethic and a few different things. I mean, you know, he walked away from $80 to $100 million that Mike Leake got, and anybody in 2012 would have said, hey, Latos is a better pitcher than Leake.
Yeah.
But, you know, just based on, you know, kind of like rubbing people raw in the organization and stuff like that, not being a great guy inside the locker room. I mean, you know, you got pushed out of the game when you were still in your prime and could throw 95 miles an hour. And that would have never happened to me anyway, because I just wasn't that guy even when I was a kid. But it definitely was something that was useful inside of an organization. Like you said, when push comes to shove, and, you know, we're going to keep this guy around versus someone else. I mean, being a good teammate matters.
Dude, same thing with the band, right? Like, and there's plenty of guys that and gals that like can play, and people don't want to. It's mostly guys,
Right? But people don't want to be around them for a long period of time.
Yeah. But you know, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're kind of a dick and
That's
you're
true.
not helping to, you know, to
Not
serve the
pulling-
song
yeah.
and like, yeah. Well, it sounds like you from the interviews I've heard about the music and about this particular band. The 04, it sounds like you got a bunch of guys who aren't that way. It sounds like you got a bunch of guys who you want to play with. And so I want to dive into the record a little bit. And there are some like huge bright spots that I just like kept listening to. And so I kind of want to talk about like a few of those songs. The first one that just that really grabbed me by the collar was Guerrilla Warfare.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that one?
Yeah, Guerrilla Warfare is probably, you know, when people say what's your favorite song on the record, it's really hard. It really is hard to pick. You know, a lot of times when I would write in the past, like I said, just about, you know, certain subjects or whatever, you'd catch a melody that you were like, oh, that's my favorite melody for sure, compared to some other songs I've written. But as these songs have come to life, and they all have, like, you know, had their own life from the original demo that I wrote into where they are on the album now, it's really hard to pick, because I just really have enjoyed almost top to bottom every song. But Guerrilla Warfare is probably the closest one to me, just near and dear to my heart, because the beginning verse is about me finding where my father was from in Cuba in 2018. So I'd taken a trip over there. My buddy Josh Klinghoffer, who's friends with, actually has played with me in many, many shows with all these guys. They're all best friends. And, you know, he wanted to be in the Chili Peppers for 10 years, and now he's out with Eddie Vedder a lot touring. And we at the Innings Festival in Arizona. It was awesome, man. It was like Josh was on stage with Eddie, and then Clint from my band here went up and played a U2 song with him, and then I went up and played Black, and I was laughing and thinking, we used to all play a bunch of Pearl Jam songs, and now we're the only 3 guys touching the stage with Ed tonight, which was amazing. But
That's awesome.
But Guerrilla Warfare, you know, Josh had told me, hey, there's a girl that I've got in Cuba that could take you around if you want to go over. And Obama had opened it up so I could fly straight in from Tampa. So I was like, this is cool, man. Jump on Southwest. I don't have to go through Canada or you know, or Mexico. So
Was that your first time?
it was my first time being there, yeah.
Okay.
And so my father had told me the only thing he'd remember was this place called Jesus de Monte, and as a little kid before he moved to the Keys. And so we went to Jesus de Monte, this area, and we took the translator, and she was asking all the old people. We were finding everybody was like 80, 90 years old. You know, do you know my grandparents' name? Do you know this name? And they were like, no. Nobody was really sure. So we went up to the church, and there was this church on the top of the hill, and they had just let church out. It was on a Sunday, and the priest was there. And it was this little old lady who was the clerk, and we asked her, do you have any paperwork or anything? And she said, give me your father and your uncle. I was with my cousin. Give me the two brothers and give me their birth dates and come back tomorrow. So we come back, and she's got hand typed out from a typewriter these freaking baptism records. It's got every person I ever knew on my father's side in Key West. They were there at these baptisms. And then it had the houses and the addresses where they lived. And so we went to these houses, and we talked to these people and asked them who they bought the house from. And they're like, we don't remember who, but it was like around 1952, which was from my family before they moved to the Keys. And so that the song opens up with, I've got a feeling in my core, we've walked these streets some time ago, this revolution in my soul, I've got a feeling. Jesus de Monte on the hill, the priest and clerk, they lie so still, my blood, it runs, I catch a chill, because it was like, I'm literally standing in the place that my family had walked, and it's such a strange, odd time capsule in the world. And that I wrote those lyrics on the plane flying home, and I didn't catch the chorus till much later. And in the chorus, I was, I've been getting a little bit of kind of pushback sometimes in a little bit of my family, because, a lot of Cubans have disdain for Fidel Castro, and in the song, I'm almost kind of, immortalizing him or saying, taking over the country in 59. But I was just kind of, I was so kind of enamored by the fact that the boat he came over with Che and only a handful of men took over this country, and you could touch the boat. I was right there in the museum, and the bullet holes are still in it. And I was just so blown away that this stuff was real. It was almost like never seeing a camel or something in your life, or going to the pyramids of Giza and be like, I can touch this thing, man. And so, it made me think, if I was 27 years old and I was taking over a country from the mountainside after I've been, exiled many years before, I mean, this is just ridiculous stuff. And so, the song's got aggression in it. It felt like it was kind of like made for what they had done in the mountainside. And so that's why I wrote that chorus about that. But I love the song, man. It's got so much energy in it.
That is okay. So it's super. I didn't know any of that backstory, right? Except that I in reading the lyrics and listening to the song several times, certainly got the feel that there was, that there was at least an undercurrent of Cuban politics, and it's obvious when you listen to it, right?
Right.
But that's really interesting to hear you say, because I kind of thought in the same way as I was listening to it, like, this isn't necessarily taking much of a stance one way or the other about Fidel, is kind of how I process it.
I'm narrating just what happened.
You're just telling the story.
I'm just telling the story about what happened. Hey, they're trying to kill me. I'm in the mountainside. We want this freedom fight. And it didn't really matter what he did with the country after the fact. It's just people were saying that Batista was a brutal dictator.
Yeah.
And he was there to try to, make the people a better place. Although a lot of people will agree that he did not make it a better place.
Yeah.
But I'm just narrating it from that time capsule of time. And the line, "The history will absolve me," was a line that is written all over Cuba, all over the walls today, even. And that was supposedly a line that he had represented himself years before he got exiled. He tried to take over the country once at the military barracks. That's when they exiled him to Mexico. He defended himself as an attorney and said, "History will absolve me. I'm on the right side of the argument. I don't really care what you do with me." Yeah. And so that's why that line is in there, because I just saw it all over the country, still plastered on the walls to this day. And it's like, you think you're going to show up to a place like that and be like, well, 50 years has gone by, 60 years has gone by, 70 years has gone by, everything will have changed. But because that's the one place in the world that is like a time capsule, you almost felt like you were still there after it just happened.
Yeah. I was there in 2017. It was the most draining vacation I've ever taken.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Yeah. My experience was just like, it was a weird time in my life. Also, like, context is important. Like, I had a cancerous growth in my stomach. I was about to have, surgery to remove my appendix. I was really like questioning my existence, in a major way. I had recently stopped eating meat, and I wasn't drinking. And so and I typically drink, but I'd been sober for like months, and hadn't been eating meat. And I go to Cuba, and so I'd lost 30 pounds. I had a fucking cancer in my stomach,
Right. Right.
And so my headspace and the context is important, but to me, it just felt so the people that I encountered felt so defeated. That was my experience. And now I've talked to so many people who have the opposite experience, where the resilience of the Cuban people.
Right. They felt the joy from the people.
The joy from the people. It's just for whatever reason, and I expected that. I expected to go and feel the joy. And to me, I just felt like like so defeated. And I did write a lot at that time because of that. There's something about that place that kind of brings it out of you, right?
Right. Yeah, I could see that though. I mean, now that I'm thinking back upon what I did when I was there, and kind of like comparing it to like the Dominican Republic or some other places I've gone to that are pretty dirt poor as well, but that you feel nothing but joy from the kids and stuff. I will say that I felt there was a bit of heaviness, not only with the military kind of watching over the public there, but also the fact that it almost felt like the ceiling was right above you and there was no place to go, regardless if you were had a PhD in engineering or whatever it was. There was you're still working at the airport for $50 a month. There was no place to go, and I did feel that quite a bit there.
So okay, so kind of shifting gears, because you talked about writing that particular song on the plane ride home, or at least starting to write it. That was a little bit of a window into your creative process. What does your process look like? Is it you strike when the iron's hot? Do you have songs kind of percolating all the time? What does it look like for you?
No, I think it was in 2018. It was a very distinct. So I'd had conversations with guys like Eddie Vedder and just different people who wrote a lot. And I would say, all the music I loved listening to as a kid. So, when I was in that weight room, my father was listening to the Mamas and the Papas and the Beatles and Billy Joel and James Taylor, and all of that was really solid and good, and Elton John. But it didn't give me goosebumps. Yeah. For whatever reason. And when I heard Stone Temple Pilots, 15 years old, I hear Creep, and it was like, oh, that's something different. And that takes me down a journey of Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Bush, Live, Matchbox 20, and Stained. And a lot of those songs, you could tell were coming from kids who had a worse upbringing than me. Yeah. That there was some sort of problems in their world. And the darkness in that, for being such an optimistic guy, I don't know why, it just resonated with me. It just felt good to listen to these songs. And so I always wanted to write that it was something that had a little angst in it. And so I would ask guys, and I would say, I'm such a joyful guy. My father made me believe that the glass is half full all the time in that weight room, no matter what. That how could I possibly write that stuff, And so I was going to try to find a formula to be able to do it. And so what I did was I went out to LA and I got some riffs from the guys in the band. And I'm like a rhythm guitar player, so when I'm writing, mostly it's going to be over regular finger chords. You're just playing your regular old A minor, GD. I'm not thinking about riffs. Yeah. And so I grabbed a couple of riffs from them, and then I came back and I had a few things that I was working on a little bit, and I would take them to Chris Lambert's house, who's down in the living room right now. He's with his wife. They came down from Cincinnati to watch the show because he had a lot to do with the demos that turned into this record. I would write with Chris. And I would write with Elliott Sloan from Blessed Union of Souls. And, wow. And so he's a big Cincinnati guy, Reds fan. We've been hanging out for years and kind of messing around, playing music together. And so I just wanted to see if someone else in the room could get me over the hump, because I never felt like I could finish a song from front to back. Like, you'd start and it would be good, but I couldn't finish the story. Yeah. I didn't know where to go. And a lot of times I didn't know what to write about, because what I wanted to write about didn't innately I didn't feel that angst in me, right? Yeah. I was always positive. So so what I did was I took these stories and I said, I'm going to write about an outside subject. And I started writing about an outside subject, and I found that having the other person in the room could get me over the hump with that fourth line in the chorus that I couldn't get, or the way that maybe just the way you enunciate a word to make it work rhythmically or whatever. And having someone else to just pull with me, and I'd say, I'm still probably like pulling 70% of the weight. Like, I'm describing like what it feels like. I'm riding in a car and I'm with this girl, man. I'm having a crush with her, and it's a perfect night. And it's 1975, and I'm going down the Sunset Strip, and I want it to feel like this, right? And I'm saying that to them, but then they're helping me piecemeal how to get it out of my mouth. Yeah. And so that really was kind of the beginning stages of being like, oh, I can finish a song. And once I would do that, and I'd leave after 4 hours, I'd come with the demo, or I'd come with just a riff and an idea, leave in 4 hours with a junky demo, and listen back in the car on the drive home and go, oh, I can do that. And then another one, and then another one. I kind of got addicted to finishing songs and seeing how I could do that. That was really the beginning of me seriously writing.
Dude, this is so much gold here. So one thing I can 100% identify with, you're a few years older than me, but we're about the same generation, right? So I'm 42. And that it's similar. Like, I grew up like middle class, my parents loved me. Right. Exactly. Like there was some shit for sure. Right. Yeah. We all have our stuff, but you know, on the whole, like my life was pretty sweet,
Right.
you know, generally speaking. And I never had a punk phase really. I think because I wasn't like pushing back against anything authority wise. Cause like I was part of this power structure.
Right,
you know?
right.
It wasn't like, it never really felt like the world was against me or anything like
Right.
that. But there was something about those grunge records. There was something about Soundgarden. There was something about Stone Temple Pilots. There was something about Pearl Jam. There was something about Nirvana. All those records that tapped into, like helped me, I think, understand angst as a universal. That like despite the fact that I'm an optimistic person, just like you were and are, that my life was pretty good overall. I wasn't worrying about where I was going to get my next meal. I wasn't worried about whether people loved me. I was supported. I got to go to baseball camp every fucking summer. You know, like all of that was great, but we all have our stuff, right? We still have. There's an angst in there somewhere, and there was something about those records I think that helped me to tap into. Oh, I'm still frustrated. I'm still angsty. There's something in there that needs to get out in some way, and that music was an outlet.
Right. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. And but then when you take it to the next level and say, how do I, you know, I can absorb it and listen to it. Man, that feels good, and I think it's tapping into something in me that I don't usually like get into. But how do I invent that myself now, right? With that small little nugget underneath there that you just discovered. That felt like an insurmountable task in a lot of ways, and it took these guys giving me some riffs that felt a little aggressive in a way, and then starting to write a story and not kind of really not focusing so much on myself and what I feel about the world, but what does it feel like to be in the Vietnam War, or what does it feel like to be with that girl on that night, you know, and kind of writing from an outside perspective. And then what I found, though, in the process is that I could take a little bit of me and who I was and weave it into the songs slightly in certain lines. And, you know, the through line to the whole record in a lot of ways is me. It's present tense, it's optimism, it's live for the moment because we will die soon, right? But from an optimistic standpoint, it's like, you know, you will die soon, knowing that, so you better enjoy the ride. This is a beautiful ride, but you better enjoy it. That's me on the record. It's all through the songs, but it wasn't the start of me thinking about what I want to write this about. It was I had to write outside of myself in order to get to a place where it felt like the songs were coming out in an honest and non-cliche way.
Man, it's great that you felt, and correct me if you didn't feel comfortable, but it sounds like you felt comfortable bringing this process to people who could give you that push-pull. And it's great that you found that, because I think for me and for a lot of folks who make stuff, I'm not comfortable with that. I've never co-written a song. Mm-hmm. I've written a ton of songs,
right?
You know, but I've always been self-conscious about it, right? Like I need my buddy Patrick Hagerman, who's an incredible songwriter, to get his eyes on my songs and be like, this is great, dude, but also, you know, here's a lyric you could change, you know, here's a progression that would make more sense. Here's a melody, here's a thought about the melody. And I'm not comfortable with it at all, man.
You don't like somebody critiquing it like that. See, I always, you know, musically, you know, because I didn't start playing until I was much later. And I always felt like it was always more fun to play with guys that were better than you. Yeah, right? If I was the best person in the band, man, it always felt like the wheels were falling off the thing. And if it's true, you know, because I didn't have a great ear from nature. You know, I don't sing harmony really. You know, I can't record a song to the damn metronome and not get off the beat, you know, like it's hard for me to stay on it. So, you know, I can play live and stay inside of that, no problem. But, you know, this very distinct kind of like robotic thing in the studio, sometimes I just couldn't do. So it was always enjoyable to be around guys who were better than me, or for instance, with Elliot, because he's a piano player, he could play the same chords as me and they sound so much different than what I'm playing on the guitar. So sometimes it will bring a melody to mind, or bring a mood to something that I wouldn't be able to do myself. And so I always really loved having somebody else in the room to work on stuff. And if you don't get anything out of that process on that one specific day, it's like, okay, no big deal. I didn't lose anything.
Right.
But if I didn't tap into them, I felt like, you know, I was never going to get to the place where the song was as good as I think it can be, because I just don't feel like you know, I mean, baseball was my life's work, and music has been something that I've picked up as a hobby on the backside that's turned a little more serious, but I felt like a pretty complete pitcher as a baseball player. I could feel my position,
Yeah.
right? I could get a bunt
Yeah.
down. I could throw strikes. I
Yeah,
could, you know, if you need to drill somebody, you can drill somebody. But musically, I'm not a complete package. And so it's nice to have some other people around who can kind of plug into you.
It's also great that because when something is that big a part of your life, I mean, I know when my baseball career ended when I was 20,
Right.
you know, it was devastating, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh, absolutely.
that moment was devastating, and it comes for all of us, right? Like the moment your career's gonna end, you
Yep.
can't play baseball for the rest of your life at a competitive level.
Yeah.
It's not a thing you can do. You can play guitar for the rest of your life. You can write songs for the rest of your life, but the thing that we were so passionate about, that we loved, it's gonna come. Now for you, thankfully, it came much later, but still, it came for you because it's going to. And you have to fill that void with something, right? Like it's so great that you've got music, because I mean, I got real self-destructive when baseball was gone.
Yeah, I could see that. I can remember standing at the plate my last at bat of my high school career, and I knew I was already drafted by the Pirates. I knew I was going to go on and play, at least in the minor leagues, and I can remember just almost tearing up at the plate, man, just thinking like, this is my last high school at bat ever, you know? And, you know, it felt very similar, you know, throughout the minor leagues, even at the end of every season. I can remember, you know, you're with these guys for 8 months and you're playing every single day and you're showering together and you're eating together and you're living together. And it's like a band of high school buddies just traveling around on these buses playing these games. And at the end of every season, you might not play with these guys ever again. And you would drive home and it felt very weird. It would take like a full week of being home to even kind of like snap out of it. It felt like your high school days were ending and I don't know if I'm ever going to see these guys again. And that went on year after year after year, you know, and like you said, luckily I got to parlay it all the way until I was 40. So, you know, you felt like you got a good ride, but you're right in the sense that you've got to have something else to fill the void. I've seen a lot of guys do nothing but take their kids to and from school after playing the big league level. And man, they're literally calling me. And it's like, sometimes it can be suicide watch, man. It's like, you've got to have something to lean into, to dig into that's hard, something to make you nervous, something to make you feel a little bit of stress. Like if you don't have that, man, it can be very difficult for somebody who's played at the top of the mountain.
Yeah. I mean, you're an all-star, you won a World Series, you won a Gold Glove. Like that's adrenaline, right? That's like, there's so much that goes into that, that if you don't have something to fill that void, it can be really dangerous. I mean, shit, like I was at an NAIA Division II school and got cut.
Right.
And it was like, you know, nobody was coming to see our games.
Right.
But still. Like,
right. But there was still, that next day when you woke up and you knew you weren't playing baseball again, it was like your girlfriend broke up with you.
100%.
Yeah. It was an empty feeling in your stomach, like a gut punch. Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I want to honor your time, and this has been incredible as I expected it would be. But I have a couple of like selfish questions. So like, your career overlapped with Joey Votto's for a while. He ended up being a great, and you'd already been in the league for a while by the point that he came into the league. Did you know like Joey was going to be as good as he was when he showed up?
You know, you heard stories about him being a pretty good hitter, but you know, you hear a lot of stories about guys and they don't come to fruition. You know, I mean, playing at the AAA level is kind of like being a college quarterback, and you have no idea really what you're going to get at the NFL level until they get there and do it.
Yeah.
And I had heard stories about Joey being pretty good, but also that he's very raw. That he didn't play baseball much as a high school kid. He was a hockey player, didn't pick it up till he was like 16, and he also was kind of a different thinker.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and he sat right next to me that very first spring training that he got called up when he was in the big leagues, at least in spring. I think that was 2007. And, you know, what did give me an indication that I thought he was going to be a pretty good hitter was we throw what is called pitcher's batting practice to the hitters. In spring training, most organizations, you do it twice. So you get there, you start getting in shape, you throw like 3 or 4 bullpens, and then you throw what they call a live BP. And a lot of times you have the L screen in front of you so you don't get hit with the line drive, and you're just trying to work on stuff, and a lot of times you tell the guys what's coming.
Okay.
But most guys are up there and they're so geeked up and they can't control the adrenaline. It's early in spring and they start throwing, you know, as hard as they can, and everything's nasty, and the hitters hate it. They hate it because some of them get drilled.
Yeah.
I've seen guys like Manny Ramirez get drilled in spring training by some young kid. I mean, you know, it's a bad situation for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I purposely early on in my career said, you know what? I'm going to throw fastballs down and away to every single guy at like 85%, and I'm just going to hit the spot and stay comfortable, not get hurt, not get these guys hurt, and also let them take some swings that they feel comfortable in, right? And so Joey was up there, and I never forget, when you're going down and away with guys, a lot of times, even in spring training, you know, they get a little geeked up. They haven't seen live pitching in a while. They can start pulling off some stuff, and you can just see that, you know, guys are wanting to hit the ball to the pull side. And Joey, I just went down and away all day to him, and man, he shot me to left center field like one hoppers off the wall all day. And for a guy to do that at a really young age and not even look so comfortable doing it, I was like, ooh, this guy's got something here. I don't know how good it's going to be, but man, that's a different look.
You talked about him being that's a great story. Thank you. Him being kind of a different thinker. I don't know if he's a musician at all, but like it seems like there would be for you guys like a lot of synergy creatively there.
Yeah, you know, he is a creative guy, and it's harder for him to kind of pin it down. He's finding his way now, and part of it is the fact that he is, you know, like you said, you know, you don't have a lot of time because you're taking care of your body, you're doing all these things as an athlete, but he has always been kind of almost manic about the fact that he needs his rest, he needs this, he needs that, he needs his food, you know, so he hasn't thought outside of the game of baseball. I'd say of anybody I've ever played with, he probably has thought outside of the game less than anybody.
Wow.
And so Joey's smart. I can tell he tinkers with a lot of things, man. He speaks a lot of Spanish now. He has gotten into like geology. He, you know, he can be like a comedian. I've been trying to, yes, he's into chess. I've been trying to convince him in Cincinnati to get down like just a 15-minute rock star comedy set and open up for me at like, you know, Bogart's or something, and let my band play afterwards, and have the band on the stage with him at the end of his set and play something just really cool, almost like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a William Shatner do like a thing, and then he would almost like talk over a song. He's wearing a tuxedo and smoking a cigarette. Just like this kind of cool thing, and I wanted to see if he could capture that, and I bounced it off him a few times, you know, and he says, man, you know what kind of balls you gotta have to do something like that, Bronson? I'm like, I know, and you got them, bro. Like, let's do it, you know. But he hasn't gotten there. But you know, I was just out in spring training, and they had a talent show that day, and he opened up the talent show, and he was like the MC, and he's really stepped it up in the last 2-3 years to really kind of show the young guys that he could break outside of his shell, even in the end of his career, and try to put the right foot forward to be kind of a role model to these guys. And so I think he's going to get there, and he's going to be creative in his afterlife, but I don't know, you know, when that's going to be.
I don't know, Bronson. I like your record a lot, and I think you're have a wonderful voice. And the videos I've seen of you performing, you have a great presence. But are you sure you want to follow Joey fucking Votto doing a comedy show?
Well, you know, maybe it's
be careful what you wish for.
Might not be an ideal night, but I feel like you know what. The other thing that people don't realize is, you know, when I think about this band, and I think about, you know, I've sat in Portland, Maine, with an acoustic guitar, and I had never barely even played shows in public at all. When it was in 2005 with the Red Sox, I put this Covering the Bases record out, and the 5,000 people show up in Portland, Maine.
Wow.
And when I think about that now, I think, man, if I could harness the power of what it was to be a Red Sox player and have this band and this record out, you know, which wouldn't have been possible, but if you could, the power of that. So I wanted Joey to hit the stage and do something like that before he retires, because after you leave, man, you know, in a lot of ways, it's, you know, the new shiny toy, man, the new player gets most of the love, and that's just the way it is, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But I wanted him to try to do that while he was still playing the game.
That's super interesting, man. Yeah. All right, I wanna let you go, but before we do, we always end on what you're getting down on. So that's the art that has you fired up right now. That could be a record you're listening to, could be a painting you saw, a TV show you're into. Like, what's got you fired up right now, art-wise?
Oh man, I've been so darn busy with his own record, honestly. It's like, I've been doing nothing but sitting in my basement talking to radio stations for 5 hours at a clip thinking about this album. I mean, honestly, learning these songs acoustically and trying to figure out a way to play them myself has got me fired up lately. That's for sure. But
that's exciting.
I'd say, you know, the Lumineers, man, I can't get enough of them the last few years. Gosh, I saw them here at Innings Festival last year. There's just something about these records. You can put them on all day, every day, and you never get tired of them. And, you know, there's something magical about being able to play slow music time and time again and still draw people in.
Yeah.
Very hard to do. You know, that's got me stuck for the last 2 years.
Okay. That reminds me of a thing that I did want to ask you about, which is just that, like you mentioned earlier, listen to some of those 90s grunge records and them tapping into something. And now Eddie Vedder is like a part of your life. Can you talk just briefly about like that's got to be a crazy feeling.
It is, met Eddie in 2010 at a show in Columbus. It was the first time I'd seen Pearl Jam, and he was very inviting. Got to sit in his green room.
Did he know who you were?
Yeah, he was such a big baseball fan.
Yeah.
I had been beating up on his favorite team, the Cubs, for a while. So because of that, he definitely knew who I was. And
Yeah.
some of my
That's fucking wild.
some of my greatest stories about Eddie are like, him calling me, being like, "Man, I watched you pitch last night. I was rooting for the Cubs and I was rooting for you, and you just tore us apart, man." And just being, just having someone on that level, kind of watch what you do and being enamored by that, is a strange feeling. I remember I was in Pittsburgh. I was 24 years old. I was pitching against the Cardinals that night, and I was up and down a lot of times, and you didn't get to have too many really comfortable days at the big league level back then. But this day I was having a good night. I remember striking out Mark McGwire for the second time, and I looked over, and up on the Jumbotron, they showed Arnold Palmer, and he was, clapping and watching me pitch, and it was like, wow, this is crazy, man.
That's
like,
wild.
just punched out Mark McGwire, and Arnold Palmer's watching me throw, But being with Eddie is a lot of times you meet people and they are just people.
Yeah.
Partly doesn't matter where they've played,
Yeah.
you feel those insecurities, whatever
Yep.
it is.
Yep.
When you're in a room with him, it really feels like it's something special. It feels like a guy who has a few more answers to the universe than you. And I don't often feel that way in a room with people, and it's never gotten old. We just played at Innings Festival with him and just sitting and rehearsing a couple hours before we went up, and it's just like, everything from his handwriting to his present tense attention to remembering names, all of those things. And to think that came in a package that I adored as a kid, right? That the Pearl Jam 10 record has been as big a part of my life as almost anything.
Yeah.
And, to have someone make you feel that special and, on the record and then in person for many, many years has been absolutely incredible. And one time I remember it was after a show. It was just me and him. We're drinking some Coronas, and we were talking. He was telling me a story about Kurt Cobain's death, and that was when he started smoking cigarettes for the first time. And we were back there, and we listened to some Fugazi, man, and he was kind of hyped up, and his tour manager kept saying, "We got to get on the bus, Eddie." And he was like, "Just one more beer, one more song," and we were hanging back there. And I remember we were both pissing at a urinal in the room. And I looked over at him and I said, it was funny because I said, "You ever find it funny, Eddie?" I said, you loved The Who as a kid. You kind of say you might not be alive if it wasn't for that music, and it was the only thing keeping you alive. And now you've played on stage with them and you're friends with them, And I said, it was funny. I said, Johnny Bench called me today, and I said, I threw him into voicemail because I didn't have time to talk. And I said, isn't that strange, And Eddie just looked at me, man. He just looked at me and he didn't even blink, man. He just goes, "We earned this shit, didn't we?" I said, "Oh man, it's crazy."
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's been a good ride, man. If I tell him all the time when I've been with him, it's like, if at least I tell myself, it's like if I never got another autograph, another sticker, another T-shirt, another hug, another anything from him, I've had my fill in a way that it's more than I could have ever expected, and that has been a highlight of my life for sure.
Oh my God, what a perfect way to end it, Bronson. Thank you so much for this, dude. This has been an incredible conversation.
Yeah. Hey, honestly, man, listen, no BS. People come all the time and want to talk, man, but digging in, man, to the subtleties and the stuff you're doing, this is good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What a beautiful night to share with you. What a beautiful night to share with you. We can do what we want without any rules. Just what we want without any rules. So remember these times, 'cause they won't last forever. Not forever.
Bronson Arroyo, y'all. Thank you so much, Bronson. Thank all of you for listening. This was such a thrill. After we recorded, Bronson gathered his band and played a song for me. I wasn't going to be able to make it to the festival to catch their set, so he was like, "Well, let's just put a little something together for you right now." It was so cool. They sound great. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. It was incredibly cool. The song you're hearing in this episode is Nights Alive off their record Some Might Say. Thank you so much to Bronson and his folks for letting us use it. marinadepodcast.com for all things The Marinade, including written pieces, photography, our online store, and more. I suspect that this episode has probably brought some new listeners. Give us a follow on Instagram, TikTok, Spoutable, and Twitter. Let us know how you feel about the show. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about The Marinade. These are all free ways to support this work that we're doing. And if you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community. For just $2 a month, y'all, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making The Marinade. We have a somewhat new monthly show. We're about to record episode 4. It's called What We're Getting Down On. And it's a conversation between me and my good friend, Peter Haroldson. Also, check out our show Inner Child, where I ask our guests childlike questions such as favorite food, TV show, stuff like that. It's all on Patreon. It's all just $2 a month. But if you want to support the show financially and you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, I totally get that. You can Venmo or PayPal us just at The Marinade. All the money goes right back into the making of the show. For example, we've done this for so long now. Since 2016, I've been making these episodes. And so I've run out of space like everywhere. And so, one of the things that the Patreon pays for is just iCloud storage. So, those kinds of things, those little costs that go into the show, the Patreon basically pays for the overhead right now, which I really appreciate. But if we could also get to a point where I can use some of that money to cover festivals, that would be awesome. We've got some cool opportunities and we just need to figure out how to make it happen. But above all, we're just thankful that you listen and spread the word about The Marinade. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.